And welcome everyone back to our next episode of CRE Unplugged. I'm Nadine Ezzi, and with me today is my incredible co-host, Ryan Elazari. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing great, Nadine. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm awesome. Summer. We're in the middle of summer. I just got back from a fabulous trip home for me. My home state is Ohio. Hometown is Canton, Ohio. Celebrated my sweet niece's 1-year birthday. And I got to tell you, living in Boston and going back to the Midwest, to my hometown in Canton, Ohio, I swear it feels like everything's just given away for free. Just the difference in the cost of everything, man. I got to tell you, it's tough. It's tough sometimes going back to Boston. But other than, it was good. It was a really good trip home. How are you? What's new?
Well, first, I want to say your niece is adorable. The pictures of you guys in pink was so cute. She's got like these like big old cheeks that I want to squeeze. If I see her soon, I want to squeeze those cheeks. She's so cute.
You have a cheek squeezing pass. You have it. I know. Only my love for that girl could get me to don a hot pink skirt. I know. Only her. But yeah, it was great. It was great. But you saw that beautiful flamingo cake. Custom made. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, that cake. I'm like, yeah, $34. Boston, it would be at least $150. So I got to say, people knock on the West.
At least, yeah.
Yeah, they knock on it. But listen, your money goes a little further. But anyway, what's going on with you?
Oh, I mean, I got a little update from the story of me being in jail in my early 20s. I realized that after telling the story on the podcast, I needed to tell my parents, and I knew that they didn't listen to the episode. So I was like, all right, let me sit them down. My uncle came into town from LA a few weeks ago, and I thought it would be a good place for me to say it at the dinner table. So once I told the story, my dad literally was about to faint. He thought he was like, wait, so you're a felon? He was completely in shock. My mom had to like calm him down. She thought it was hilarious.
Stop it.
Yeah.
Dad got upset?
My dad was freaking out. My mom is like, Ryan has a wife and 2 kids. What are you talking about? Like, and it's not even on my record.
Has he gotten over it? Is he still upset?
Yeah, I think he's fine. Right. I think he's fine. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he was trying to look at my wrist to see if I still had the markings of the handcuffs.
No, he was actually looking at your wrist.
No.
Papa Elazari, you're cracking me up, man. You're cracking. Your son has turned out to be a stand-up human being and fine citizen of New York City. There's nothing to be concerned about.
Thank you, Nadine. And you're filming from a different country, right?
I know. I am filming this from Montreal, Canada. First time here. I am here with my mother. We're celebrating her birthday. Just around.
Happy birthday, Mom.
Yeah, she'll say thank you. She'll say thank you. Yeah. Can't wait. I've heard nothing but great things about this town. I've even got some tips from our next guest today on where to dine. So I can't wait to take them up on that. But yeah, I've heard nothing but good. Have you been here? You've been here.
I've been there 4 times.
4 times?
Great time each time I've been there. It's a beautiful city, very European.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Spencer Levy, we have this great guest on. Looking forward to it. We got to hear him.
Yes, I am very excited for our guest today. And for our listeners, why did we choose this guest today? A number of reasons, but specifically, our industry is at a very critical inflection point. Everyone's trying to predict where certain sectors are headed with things from return to work, office bottoming out, industrial renaissance, technology, you name it. Everybody's trying to figure out where our industry is going. And we decided to speak to someone with an eye always on the economy, the critical data, and who knows a thing or two about predicting industry trends.
Yeah, Nadine and I heard him speak at the NAIOP Symposium in Minneapolis in May. And what was amazing was he was so insightful and talking about all the different asset classes with clear and precise data. So it was so engaging because the audience was on the edge of their seat, listening to his every word. It's a real skill for him to be able to capture an audience of 1,000 people.
Exactly. Yeah, those can sometimes be a bit dry. those speeches, but honestly, he was so high energy, so engaging, humorous, intelligent, funny. I mean, the guy does this all over, speaking. And so, you and I were we just had to have him.
Yeah, it was definitely clear we needed to have him on the podcast.
All right, so let's get to it.
I'm excited to introduce our guest, Spencer Levy. He's the Global Client Strategist and Senior Economic Advisor for CBRE. Welcome, Spencer.
Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for having us, Spencer. So we understand that we are getting you fresh off a 5-country European trip.
Indeed.
What countries did you visit? How was it?
It was great. Did Northern Europe because I like it cool outside. And so we went to Copenhagen, Denmark. We were in Sweden for 1 hour, but then we went to Vienna, Austria, Amsterdam, and Geneva, Switzerland. And it was fantastic, nice and cool, best food I've ever had.
Really? In all of those countries, or was one country stand out for the food?
I would say they were all great. I don't normally go to fancy talk here. I don't normally go to Michelin-starred restaurants because they're typically too fancy for me. But there were so many of them there, and they were terrific. And then some of them were lower key than others. And so I would say go on an eating adventure there. The best meal I had, by the way, was a little French restaurant in Geneva, Switzerland that we just hit for lunch. And it was like the best of everything I've ever had in a French restaurant. So they're all over Europe. Europe is a food continent. Hit it.
Geneva, Switzerland, duly noted. All right. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for joining us, for taking you away from your international travels. Pleased to have you.
You've been called the Johnny Cash of real estate. Would love to learn more about your background and your career trajectory and how you got to earn such a informal title.
Well, I think I earned it the old-fashioned way. To quote Johnny Cash, "I've been everywhere, man." As the song goes. I travel about 150 to 200,000 miles a year, mostly in the United States, but as noted, sometimes internationally as well. I got that moniker, I would say, in the last 10 years as my career has taken a path which makes me a very public figure within the industry. I probably give more public presentations than anybody. I also host CBRE's podcast, The Weekly Take. And so my public persona, it's hard to fax a speech. I do plenty of speeches over Zoom, don't get me wrong, but hard to fax a speech. And I'm old enough to call it a fax machine still, right? And but I really love being with my clients, our clients, and face-to-face is the way to be. So that got me the moniker of just being everywhere all the time. But how did I get here? Well, I've had a diverse career. I started off as a lawyer. I was then an investment banker. I worked for a real estate developer. And now I've been at CBRE for almost 17 years in a variety of roles, including I helped run capital markets in a variety of different hats. I ran America's research, and then it evolved into this public-facing spokesman type role. And I think this came from two things. One, it came from my diverse background that I really understood real estate from a variety of perspectives. And then I trained my own communication skills. I didn't train myself. I was trained. I was brought to a trainer who was the spokesperson for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then I continued to train and became this communications expert, at least as a communicator, but I also teach public speaking as well. So it's a long, fancy way of saying this. I give lots of speeches for clients on both the investor and the occupier side of the house. I consider myself very fortunate to have this role. I love it. I like traveling. I have fun with the traveling. I bring my family with me on these trips. So rock and roll. And thank you, Johnny Cash, for the moniker.
And you started off as an attorney, correct? So, you didn't have like a typical real estate career path.
Well, I was a real estate lawyer. So
okay.
What I did was I probably did, I don't know, X million square feet of leases, sales, mortgages. So, and they were all in real estate. So even to this day, when there are complex lease questions that come up, I'm like, well, I dealt with that issue at length when I was a younger professional. And so all of it builds on each other. Everything you do in life should theoretically build on it. But I've only done real estate for my almost 30-year career. And having seen the world from a variety of angles, I always think about that Joni Mitchell song. I've seen the world from both sides, clouds from both sides now. And I don't even know clouds at all, is how the line of the song goes. I think I know real estate a bit, and the variety of angles I've seen it really help. But I think they really wouldn't amount to much if I didn't have the oral and written communication skills to be able to bring it to the public in a way that they like. And when I say they don't like long white papers most of the time. They like a nice clip from the weekly take, or I do a lot of social media. LinkedIn is a major avenue for me to give ideas, and I give them a little sound bites, and it's been extremely effective as to get ideas out to the general public in real estate in a way that they really respond to.
Yeah, well, we love following you on LinkedIn. We're going to get into that post that we saw a couple days ago of you. I know Ryan's going to get into, and we want to talk more about your speaking journey as well in a little bit, but we're going to pause on that. So, Spencer, you said to us that if you've always said the focus in commercial real estate should be local politics, and that if you were king, you would solve two problems, major problems that are facing our communities today. What are those problems, and what role does local politics play with them?
Sure. So I think the two problems I would solve are affordable housing, which is probably problems 1, 2, and 3, and then improve our public schools. And they're actually the same issue. They're the same issue because one of the reasons why we don't have enough affordable housing is people don't want affordable housing near their public schools, and other reasons. And the public schools challenges are a problem of opting out of folks that are of means rather than opting in. And I think we need to change the public schools in a way that makes people want to go there. And I think that's people from all socioeconomic backgrounds. But along with that, we should solve the affordable housing crisis. And part of it is putting it into these areas with public schools, with better public schools. And the reason why this is so important isn't just for the obvious reasons that we need more affordable housing. I was on a call earlier today, and they said that we were 6 or 7 million units short. That's probably about right. The reason is bigger than that. The reason is the day-to-day reason is everybody deserves to go to a great school and have great housing. But part of the social fabric in America is getting weaker. And part of that social fabric is getting weaker. And you can see every statistic about who is moderate, who is left, who is right. And people are getting pulled further apart. And part of the reason why people are getting pulled further apart is because they don't go to the same institutions. And I think perhaps the most important institution of all are schools and your local community.
Yeah, I'm seeing that in my town of Boston, where I live. I think we were chatting about this last week. Communities are having to vote on changing their zoning to allow multifamily in communities that have historically been single family homes, and in exchange for increased federal funding, and they're shooting it down. They don't want to change their zoning to multifamily for a number of reasons. And so
money's not going to solve it, by the way. There's enough money in the world to solve this problem. It's the want, the need, the getting over the fear factor of people who want to move into your community for whatever the reason. There needs to be, but again, it gets worse as the social cohesion gets weaker. People are more likely to vote no on things like that.
What can we do as a society to help people get over that fear?
I wish I knew. And I think that I'm an optimist. I for many years served on the board of a school in inner city Baltimore called the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women. I was very proud of that. I was one of the founding board members of that school. And the problems are so complicated. They're so big. It's more than a charismatic leader joining the fray and running for office. There are institutional issues that need to be solved that are much bigger than that. Now, in the near term, I am the chairman of the Real Estate Roundtable's Research Committee, and which is a big lobbying organization, the biggest lobbying organization for commercial real estate. And for our industry, we try to do certain things to improve the industry, including making it easier for foreign investors to come in, to bring more money to convert office buildings into multi-housing, to have terrorism risk insurance that's federal in nature rather than local, to have flood insurance, things like that. And I think in the near term, those are the kind of things that can be done, but they can be done better with coalition building. And the coalition that we talk about quite a bit at the Roundtable is teaming up with our multifamily friends, and not just the Class A luxury multifamily, friends, the people in affordable housing. I think affordable housing is a win for everybody. And I think the only solution to affordable housing is more supply. And I think that if you tie that appropriately to the right type of incentives, you can get a lot of people on board. And that's the only way to get big things done. Ideas, charisma, leadership are all important. But the practical reality is today you need coalitions of people that may have different interests, but they can come together over things like affordable housing to get big things done.
I think the best way to go about this is to allow more office conversions. And I know that the state and federal government is always a little bit behind on that, but there needs to be some action done in the near term, as you said, in getting those office conversions done and creating incentives for it.
Well, I talk about this at great length in a variety of forums, and there's two basic ways you can do that. One is to make it cheaper for the developer to make the conversion, and that would be either to have a direct cash transfer, tax incentives, or just have the basis of these buildings being low enough that the math pencils out. And when I say the math pencils out, the math has to pencil out.
Yeah.
And as compared to spending that money on something else, and that something else is ground up multifamily development someplace else, which is a lot easier, a lot more certain, which brings you to the second part of it, which is permitting. I think that if you think about Finance 101, the time value of money is incredibly important, particularly in conversions when you have complex permitting issues as it relates to not just the plumbing and the electricity, but the structural integrity of the building. And if these things can be expedited, obviously in a safe way, but in a way that you can take the permitting time down from what could be 3-4 years today to 1 year or less, I'm in that camp. I'm not in the more monetary transfer camp, even though I advocate for it and I believe we need more of it. I think we need permitting relief. And so some municipalities, states have tried that. In fact, Florida is one of them. They have something that's known as the Live Local Act, that if you convert an old office building into some form of multifamily, which includes an affordable component, you're able to reduce that permitting time from that 3-4 years to 1 year or less.
Wow.
I think that's the kind of thing we need to be able to materially increase the amount of conversion. And by the way, we need it. We need it for 101 different reasons, not the least of which is to build more affordable housing, but also the tax base of these cities are going to get eroded. Nobody wins with a zombie building.
Yep.
Nobody. It just brings everybody down.
There's definitely a lot that needs to be done there. And yeah, I completely agree with you there. A book that has completely changed Nadine and I's outlook on globalization is The End of the World is Just the Beginning. It's authored by Peter Zahan, and it emphasizes how China's decline in aging and population has created a major effect on manufacturing. How has that impacted the industrial market, and where do you see the growth in manufacturing?
Manufacturing is a current success story in the United States that's been spurred by a variety of macro and micro factors. The macro factors are some of the geopolitical tensions between the United States, China, and others that have deglobalized to some degree. And that deglobalization takes the form of reshoring of manufacturing, not just to the United States of America, but to the Americas. And that includes Mexico and Canada. Mexico is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, area where China invests outside of China. I heard a number, this could be, it's directionally right, might be somewhat off mathematically, but China invested something like $25 billion in new manufacturing in Mexico. So that's a big number. And in the United States, and again, this is going to be generally right, specifically probably a little off, but if you take a look at all the numbers of the new manufacturing sites, or better stated, the new number of billion-dollar developments going on in the U.S., most of which are manufacturing in nature, it's something like 32 jobs are underway as we speak. And you say, well, what does that mean? Well, in 2008, there was $1 billion job going on in the United States. And for all you Vegas fans, that was the Aria Mandarin Oriental development by MGM. So it's a massive, massive change. And the massive change is not just all of these new manufacturing sites, it's all of the appurtenant real estate, traditional real estate. So you take New Albany in Ohio, and by the way, it kills me to tell you this. It's just outside of Columbus, and that kills me because my son goes to Michigan, and every time I give this case study, he's like, "Oh, you can't say that, Dad." But
My
in
home
any event,
state, Spencer. It's my home state from
there you
Cleveland.
go. See that? Giving some love to Ohio State because I teach there too.
Yes, you do.
Absolutely. Proudly, I might add. Proudly. But if you take a look at New Albany, I think it forms the model of what we're talking about here, about all the positive externalities of new manufacturing. And so next to the new Intel chip plant there are a couple of new data centers from some of the big tech companies. You see new industrial, you see new multifamily, you see new retail, office, all of that are pertinent to this Intel plant. So much so that I was at meetings with two household name institutional investors recently, both of whom said, when I mentioned this very same case study, they now call Columbus, Ohio, a quote, primary market, which is a stunning shift if you think about it. Because if we talked about what is a primary or a gateway market, which is what the term a lot of people use, it was always New York, San Francisco, LA, Miami, Los Angeles, and maybe Dallas, maybe Seattle, now Columbus. And I think Columbus has gotten it not just because of the Intel chip plant and the pertinent development. It's also its location. It's a great place for logistics in terms of the number of people that live nearby, the crossroads, the rail, all that stuff. So there's a long, fancy way of saying this. Because of the deglobalization, the reshoring, the new manufacturing boom, I think it's changing the nature of institutional grade real estate from some of the traditional gateways to some of these other markets. And it's not necessarily just in industrial and multifamily. It could also be in some of these other pertinent uses. Now, there are other shifts going on that don't have anything to do with manufacturing in the major cities, but those shifts within the major cities have to do with bringing all of these different uses together in more of a live work play submarket. And so I just had a call recently, literally like an hour ago, and we talked about what markets do you like? And I said, well, I don't like any market, but I like a lot of submarkets. I think that when you look at the metro area data, it is misleading, both positively and negatively, in that there may be some metros that overall look great, but they have some terrible submarkets, and vice versa. You have some metros that might be stuck in the mud with no growth, and they might have some great submarkets. And I think that's how institutions have to start to look at real estate a little bit more carefully, because they were always concerned that if they went to a secondary market, they would have no exit liquidity.
What about my old town of Cleveland, Ohio, Spencer? Are people going to be flocking to that anytime soon?
Well, I'm going to Cleveland, Ohio next week with my son. We're probably going to a Guardians game and to play some golf. So, and I go a bunch. But look, cities like Cleveland and some of the, I have a charity event in Akron, Ohio in early September. So I go there quite a bit. All of these cities need a couple of things. They need, first of all, a little bit of luck. And that little bit of luck is like what happened in Detroit, where they had a high net worth individual, Dan Gilbert, I believe it was, that helped rebuild the city. Yeah. And they need the Dan Gilbert of Cleveland. They need the Dan Gilbert of Akron. Baltimore needs it. And, you know, we're fortunate to have Under Armour here. Kevin Plank has played that role to some degree. And we're thankful every day that he's here. But that's the little bit of luck. But ultimately, cities are immobile. But money and people are mobile. So you need to make your city as attractive as possible so that people want to go there and they can get the kind of investment returns that are superior to what they can get in other markets. So cities have a lot to do with this. And so there's a terrific report by a research group that I do a lot of work with called Yardi, which talks all about this. And when you talk about which cities you can and should invest in, they don't just look at supply and demand of the 4 or 5 major asset classes. They're also looking at the availability of water, the availability of electricity, ease of doing business. It all makes complete sense on the surface, but cities read this and they sometimes have self-defeating policies that makes that marginal investment dollar go elsewhere.
I think that white knight could be LeBron James. What do you think, Spencer?
I told them in Akron they should rename Akron to LeBron Jamesville. So yes, completely on that train.
They really should, seriously, Bo. But I was there for the big announcement. I saw some jerseys burned that night, so that's a night that's going to be emblazoned in my brain.
Let's give LeBron a little bit of love here, okay?
Listen,
I know he left Cleveland. And
I
went
didn't
to
burn a
Miami,
jersey.
Then he came back. Look, he was a very young man when he did this. Okay,
Yeah.
when he moved to Miami, I think he was 25. He brought glory to Cleveland. He brought them a title. He's entitled to
I
go
love the man.
to Miami. He's entitled to go to LA. So I'm not saying there aren't reasons your feelings shouldn't be hurt, but I am the exact opposite of a LeBron hater. That guy has changed the NBA. He does a lot of charitable work. He's built a lot of schools. And so any event.
Stand-up human being.
If LeBron's listening, a lot of
Oh
love.
no, I wasn't. Don't put me in his hater camp, Spencer. I did not say that. LeBron, if you're listening, that was Spencer putting me there. I sobbed during that championship, LeBron. I was there and I was at that parade. So
I mean, the fact that he's almost 40 and he's playing at this high level, like
Yeah.
he's in the Olympics, he's like one of the main players, is unbelievable to me.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, this is not a NBA basketball podcast, but LeBron is like a man from the future. There have been a few athletes like that over time. Jim Brown was maybe the first one in the 60s. He was just bigger, faster, stronger at a position that never were like that before. And but then now people have caught up to him to some degree, but he's still great. And so Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, same thing. I mean, I can name 10. I'm a big NBA fan, so I can name it. But bottom line is more power to him. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Spencer, this wouldn't be CRE Unplugged if we didn't talk about innovation and technology a little bit. So, which there's a little bit of action going on in that sector right now. Folks may have heard of artificial intelligence and AI. What is your stance, Spencer, on the current state of innovation within the industry, specifically the commercial real estate's proclivity to adopt technology, the quality of that technology? How has it impacted us today? Where do you see that going?
I like to break it into two categories. I like to break it into property level technology and then the other stuff, because the other stuff is where AI comes in. If you take a look at building technology, measurement of not just who's there, the amount of electrical usage, water usage, everything that you could possibly measure in a building, the hockey stick is already curved. It's already diminishing returns as far as I'm concerned, because you can measure everything. Anything that can be counted is being counted or very close to it, at close to the most efficient way to do it. Okay, so that's building level technology. But now we've got the big AI sitting out there, and that's where we're just scratching the surface, because the areas within real estate where we're kind of nowhere, notwithstanding what people think, is in predicting where markets are going to be, asset types and other things. Now, there are the basics of demographics and office using job growth and logistics patterns. All that stuff is predictable, but I had many a client who said, oh, we've got this algorithm that's going to predict which office market and sub-market down to the corner we should be on. Well, that went over like a Led Zeppelin, folks. It didn't work and failed spectacularly, in part because of over-reliance on tech. The single biggest tech error in the real estate business of all time happened in 2007. And that was the model which said that the price of the average single family American home could never go down. That one assumption, which was then proved false, almost took down the entire financial world. So there's real risk in over-reliance on technology, particularly when you make assumptions like that go the wrong way. But now that I've been negative on technology, now I'll be very positive on the predictive nature. So AI is just at the beginning. And so there's tremendous opportunity within real estate to get the right inputs for your algorithm to actually be predictive. And that's on the pragmatic, investable side of the equation. The place where it's nowhere is productivity. So I was on the phone today with one of the largest banks in the world, and we were talking about, how do you measure productivity? You can't. It's still not measured. Efficiency is measurable. That's the light switches on and off. But productivity, are people going to be better? Are people going to be revenue generating in a particular environment versus another? Still not a great place to be because the measurement isn't there. But I think AI is going to help as the calculations just magnify. The other thing that AI is going to do is going to change where we have institutional grade investable real estate. So in the data center space, which is now booming, it's had it for the reasons that AI needs a lot of it. It's not necessarily going to boom in the data center clusters that we have today. So we have data center clusters in Northern Virginia, in Northern California, in Midtown Manhattan, and Dallas. And the reason is this, is AI does not need to be appurtenant to another data center. The data centers that are clustered in those areas have to be appurtenant. What does that mean? The speed of light actually matters in terms of speaking from one data center to the one next to it, and being next to it, they can speak faster, but AI can be further afield because it doesn't need that speed of light transfer of information when it's doing all of its calculations remotely. Where am I going with this? It means that what is going to drive AI data centers is going to be water and electrical availability. And that's going to put them into some tertiary locations that have a lot of that. We're even hearing some folks going to places that have soon to be decommissioned nuclear power plants because they have excess power and they're in the middle of nowhere. But guess what? It's a great place to be to mine Bitcoin and to have AI development. It's also going to change, once again, that calculation as an institutional investor. Do I invest in the 5 gateway markets, or do I go to Columbus, Ohio, because it now has 2 new data centers, has all these manufacturing things going on? And so I think what it's going to do is 2 things. First, I think it's going to change our predictive capabilities. Second, I think it's going to change the locations of where we have investable institutional grade real estate, including some of these tertiary markets.
Should folks be concerned about job loss?
No, they should not. And the reason they should not is because people are always afraid about job loss when the latest technology comes in. What AI can and should do is take away some of the work that is the less interesting, attractive work and give you the time and ability to do the more interesting and attractive work. And that stuff's never going away, particularly in the commercial real estate business, because this business, notwithstanding how predictive the technology is still very, very not widget-like, meaning that every building is unique. Every space in every building is unique. And you need to see that with your own eyes rather than looking at a spreadsheet and say, aha, this is the optimal space. It's not. And it's also emotional. People want to be in places where they feel comfortable, where it's hip or cool if they want to do things at work or after work. And they want to go to places where they have a good relationship with the landlord or vice versa, because relationships matter in our business more than as much as they do in any business. They matter here. And it's hard to have a relationship being built on the backs of predictability. It is very personal. I just did a dinner in DC on Tuesday night. We brought together 13 folks, about half occupiers, half investors, and we just talked in a non-transactional way. And it was just a great discussion that couldn't have been done over a Zoom call. It couldn't have been done over an algorithm. Relationships matter, face-to-face matters. And if AI does take away some functions, it will free up time for other functions. Will there be some job losses? There's always creative destruction. That's Joseph Schumpeter, all right? Where you want to go back to some classic economists, he's the person who coined that phrase. I believe that phrase, and yes, there may be some short-term pain in certain areas, and I'm not welcoming that, but I am welcoming the longer term, which is going to be better for everyone.
Hear, hear. It's one of the reasons why I love this industry so much. And to your point, it is not the first time in history that there has been job loss, equated though with job gains after any type of innovational revolution or whatnot. So
I don't think I had Joseph in my economist trading cards. I have to go look at my collection again.
I'm going to give you one of my secret sauce things. So people ask me all the time, well, what do you read? Well, I'm a voracious reader of everything, but the one thing that I think everybody in our business should read at least once a quarter, I'm not saying once a month, once a quarter, because it's a very hard read, is The Economist magazine. The Economist magazine has the biggest ideas. They're dense, and they also have a section there once a month called the Schumpeter forum. It might be once a week, by the way, but it's in there. That's how I was able to pull Schumpeter right out of my head.
Spencer Levy just spilling his secrets on CRE Unplugged, everyone.
There you go.
You're listening and taking notes.
I took a AP history class, and our teacher in high school, he really stressed reading The Economist. So I've not read it as much, but I highly agree. It's definitely a great read. I want to go back to data centers. You know, when we were at the NAIOP symposium in Minneapolis, you brought up this crazy statistic about how households, how data centers use as much water as 20,000 households. And
I think I pulled that one out of The Economist too, by the way.
Okay.
Like literally, right? I'm not making this stuff up. Let's just both agree whether it's 20,000 or 10,000 or 30,000, it's a lot. And then nobody's disputing that it's a lot. And that's why people are trying to innovate with air cooled. Now it's like, you know, robbing one person to save another, because air cooled uses more power, right? Okay, great. You save water, more power. And then some people have tried subterranean, is that the right word? Underwater data centers, because waters are coolant. But I also believe that data centers are going to go further north because cool is in the environment up there. But when you put it into low water, high heat environments, that's when the problems really come in, because there's scarcity.
Yeah. So what are the potential implications for the future of data storage and processing in terms of usage and sustainability?
I think it goes right back to what I was talking about, the Yardi analysis, where those places that have abundant and cheap water and electricity look really good. And so there's a terrific author, Parag Khanna, who's another person I would recommend you read, probably one of the world's foremost demographers. And Parag had him on my podcast, The Weekly Take, and Parag was talking about how the Midwest. So going back to the Midwest, it looks very attractive over the long term because those Great Lakes have a lot of water and it's cooler up there. And so, not to mention cool, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, of course, is in Cleveland too.
Thank you, Spencer. One of my favorite venues. So, Spencer, we've touched upon this a little bit, but you are a prolific teacher and educator, having taught various real estate courses in over 40 schools to date, I believe, including what you mentioned, one of my home state of The Ohio State University. Throughout this tenure of your teaching, what skills are you seeing necessary for a successful career in commercial real estate? Are those skills changing, especially in light of artificial intelligence? And how can these universities help prepare these students for a successful career in our fine industry?
So I'm a little biased about what I'm about to say, but I'm going to give it to you just as I give it to students in these classes. The most successful people are people that have the combination of being rock star nuts and bolts analysts, being able to understand the math, the modeling, being very detail oriented as it relates to their work product, but also have the ability to communicate it. And that's where we fall down. Most, not some, most of the students I meet, including many young analysts at companies that I meet, are terrific when it comes to the nuts and bolts. But when it comes to communicating those ideas, very, very weak. And they're very weak for a couple of reasons. They're very weak because, first of all, people don't value the oral communication skills in the same manner that they value the nuts and bolts, Excel and Argus type of skills. The other reason is that I believe they've been taught wrong. And this may sound a little arrogant, but I think the book on how you're supposed to communicate corporately is wrong. I think the book on corporate is written in a way that you're designed to give a corporate earnings report on an analyst call, not to communicate on a sales pitch. And I think in those sales pitches, and by the way, everything's a sales pitch except for those corporate earnings calls, which those need to be by the traditional book. But when you're communicating on a one-on-one basis, you're in a pitch, you're at a dinner, you're at a lunch, you're on a phone call, you're on a Zoom call, you've got to be able to communicate your ideas, not just clearly and concisely, but here's the key word, persuasively. And people don't try to persuade, they try to inform. Two different ends of the spectrum here. One end of the spectrum, informing, Great. That's a lot of information, but you should know that in most speeches you give, 90% of the information you give to that audience is known by the audience before you say it. And that, if you come to that realization, you say, well, then what am I going to do with this 90% of time? You spend it persuading. And persuading is not informing, it is storytelling, it is emoting. Because the most important decisions in most business decision makers' lives are not made with their heads. You like to think, they like to say, oh, yes, everything's intellectual. No, it's made with their guts. And you need to find a way to get to their guts. And the way to get to their guts is to know who they are, what they're about, but also to emote in ways that accentuate what I call your win points. So back to your short question and my long answer. People are excellent at technical skills, generally speaking, underperforming for oral skills, which go hand in hand with relationship building and networking. Those are the things that I believe if you can do both, you're going to get it, and you're going to get it over the long term.
But Spencer, why is the younger generation averse to honing this skill of public communications? What's holding them back?
I don't think there are a lot of things where these young whippersnappers, they're different than we are. They're digital natives. You hear all these things, and there's some truth to some of them. The digital native thing, by the way, we should talk about social media in just a moment. That they have a huge advantage there because of being digital natives, and most of us older folks are not. But I think the communication skills, the oral communication skills, is not just a younger generation thing. I see it up and down the chain of command. And because I think that, in fact, when you're more advanced in your chain of command, you've been there longer, you may have even worse communication skills because you've been taught to communicate by the book. And I believe that the book on communication is wrong. I think it's wrong because it focuses too much on informing, not enough on persuading. And many of the most successful professionals never had to pitch because they're good relationship builders, but they're just not great at pitching. So I think the oral communication skills, if defined just by how you speak, is too narrow. It's also how you create relationships, how you network. Those types of things I would put in subsets of oral communication.
Yeah, I teach a real estate entrepreneurship class at Baruch College, and they usually do a final presentation, and I give them the choice of doing it online or in person. And more students rather present on Zoom than doing it in person in front of the judges that I bring on, and it's just fascinating to me because I try to explain to them the benefits of being able to do this, especially in the real world, and it just really doesn't hit home.
I have never once in my career, and I ain't never going to do it, have chosen Zoom over in person. Every time I have the ability to go in person, every single time you go in person.
I will say, Spencer, this is a theme that we're seeing on CRE Unplugged. Each guest that we've had has hit home the fact that our industry, our fine industry, is a relational industry. It's based on relationships, right? And the ability to be able to connect with humans. And so personally speaking for me, I love your take on this. In the past, I've been told that I spend too much time honing in on creating that kind of one-on-one relationship and to get more into the facts and whatnot. And I'm sure I needed to balance that back then. But at least personally speaking, I find that ability to create a connection with somebody is really what can set somebody apart for success in our industry. And I think you and I were talking about this when we were chatting last week. That stand-up comedy class I took didn't hurt too much either. So, folks, if you're thinking of ways
I like it, and I'd like to follow you because I've thought about that myself. But I do want to go back to this point just one more time because
please do.
I've also run into many professionals in our business that have the opposite skill set, where they're very good relationally, they're very good oral communicators, but they don't have the goods when it comes to the nuts and bolts facts. Mm-hmm. And that's worse. Mm-hmm. That's worse because if you're nuts and bolts solid, you'll have a very good career. You'll have an elite career if you have both. But if you walk into the room because you're glib, because you're able to communicate well, but you don't have the goods when it comes to the nuts and bolts, you're not going to win over the long term. In fact, my dad told me something that sticks with me. He said, the client's going to give you the first deal because they like you. They'll give you the second deal because you're good. And that's
Mhm.
what you should hang your hat on.
Yeah, I think we all need to take an improv class together sometime soon.
I'm
Do
in.
that. Gary Unplugged will start offering improv classes. Link in on our website coming soon. So, okay, Spencer, wrapping it up. We understand that you have two very specific hobbies. Are you willing to share those with our listeners?
Well, the one obvious one I think is golf, which I played recently poorly in like 1,000-degree heat, but nevertheless, it's a wonderful sport. I've been playing it since I was a very young person. Great client sport. Also, it's something you can do your whole life. So it's a wonderful thing. But the one I think that's more interesting for our listeners is in golf is horse racing. And how did I get into horse racing? First of all, you should know I never laid a bet on horse racing in my life, not once, until COVID. And during COVID, there was no professional sports on TV. And I was like, oh, what is this horse racing thing? So I was like, I'd never watched it before. And I said, this is really interesting. Why do people like this? And I've been now avidly following horse racing for about 5 years. And it's not for the gambling. It's not even for the races themselves. It's for the statistics. So one of my hobbies that I've had since I was a child is I've been reading statistics every night to put myself to sleep since I was under 10 years old. Part of the reason why I'm such a big NBA person is I went to bed with the basketball encyclopedia. So I know that thing as cold as anybody will ever know that thing. But horse racing, the statistics are deep and they go back 100 years and they're good statistics. When I mean good statistics is the minute somebody puts $1 on a statistic, it's a better statistic than when somebody gives you their opinion. You with me? Paying for something is better than thinking something. So where am I going with all this stuff? Horse racing probably has 1,000 PhD level articles written on it on the psychology of betting. And I read many of them, and they all reach the same basic conclusion. The same basic conclusion is that the favorite is always materially overbet from a risk-reward mathematical standpoint. The underdog is always materially underbet. And you say, well, who cares? Well, the reason you should care is this. It's very similar to real estate. And I learned a lot about real estate by understanding the psychology of horse betting, because I learned that that's why people go in packs for the same markets, the same asset types. That's why people run away from things like Class B office today, because it's scary. It's scary like retail was scary 10, 15 years ago. Well, you know what may be the number one asset class right now? Open air retail. And people have started coming back into that because it's now a great place to be. I got into this business in the mid 1990s and we were buying office buildings for less than $100 a foot in Manhattan. And they're selling those condo units now for $4,000 a foot. So it's a long, fancy way of saying I enjoy it. I go to the tracks are wonderful places to go. I'm going to Saratoga next week, which is my favorite place on the planet. But I'm going to Del Mar at the end of the month. It's great. But it brings up a more important point. The more important point is it doesn't matter whether your hobby is horse racing, cooking, dancing, whatever it might be. But it should be something, because doing something outside of work will make you better at work. It will make you think. I tell a lot of my colleagues, well, what should I do today? Go to the movies. Think about what you just saw. Go to a museum. Think about it. What did it make you think and feel? Because you can apply many of those teachings to the traditional workspace in ways that you won't even know until you experience it.
Yeah, one of my hobbies is I'm a fantasy sports fanatic, which brings me to your LinkedIn post yesterday. I saw that you saw your cousin Spencer Horowitz. He's actually on my fantasy team, so I thought it was hilarious that that you went to go see him. So if he doesn't do well, I might have to call you up and come after you.
We are very proud of that young man, and I'm very proud of that young man. First of all, if you follow professional sports, getting to the major leagues is like getting to the moon. But the other point about him that why we're so proud of Spencer Horowitz is because he's an older rookie. He's 26, which is an older rookie. He's undersized. He's under 6 feet tall, and he was drafted in the 26th round. and complete underdog story, but resilience, sticking it out, really made a difference for Spencer. And there's, once again, baseball lessons to be learned about life, resilience, right there in the Toronto Blue Jays starting second baseman.
Yeah, never give up. Keep going after your dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Well, congratulations to you, him, and your entire family. Spencer, thank you so much for joining us today. Truly, we were honored to have you. Before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners if they want to get in contact with you, how can they, and where can they listen to the Weekly Take?
Oh, well, thank you, Nadine and Ryan. And I think if you want to listen to the Weekly Take, go to CBRE.com. I believe it's / the Weekly Take, but just type into Google CBRE, the Weekly Take. You'll find it immediately. We're very proud of the show. Knock on wood. It's been the number one most downloaded show in real estate. We try our best to have interesting, diverse topics every day on everything under the sun. If you have any ideas, shoot me an email, and I'll be delighted to hear any ideas. All of my contact information is on the CBRE website.
Fantastic.
Spencer, you really inspired us to launch our podcast. So, I want to thank you for that.
Well, listen, this is a great forum to discuss things. Not only am I enjoying this conversation, and I certainly hope our audience does, but I think there's a broader point here. Much like social media, this is how people want to communicate today. I've written many a white paper, and I can write until the cows come home. But the point is that you need to communicate in a way that people want to be communicated with. And I'm a big believer in the podcast format.
Thank you again, Spencer.
Thank you both.
Be sure to stay tuned for our recap after a word from our sponsor. Hey there, CRE Unplugged fam. We would like to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, the Game Changers over at Hilo, the customer experience platform for buildings that's turning heads in the real estate world.
That's right. Can we talk about how Hilo is transforming the way we manage properties and create unforgettable experiences? Ryan, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about Hilo?
Well, Nadine, it's all about reducing friction in property management. Hilo is like the magic wand that makes everything seamless and efficient. Say goodbye to those time-consuming tasks and hello to streamlined operations and communications.
Efficiency is crucial, but what about personalized experiences? Hilo takes it to the next level with a vision to tailor each interaction to the needs and preferences of its customers.
And let's not forget the community aspect. Hilo builds vibrant, connected communities. It's fostering a sense of belonging and togetherness.
Now, here's something that truly sets Hilo apart: their commitment to advancing ESG initiatives. They're not just about buildings, they're about making a positive impact on the environment. That's a win-win for everyone.
So, to our listeners out there, if you're ready to elevate your properties, digitize and enhance customer experience, and maximize satisfaction, Hilo is the answer. Please visit hiloapp.com for more information. That's hiloapp.com.
Ryan, congratulations on another recorded episode of CRE Unplugged.
Thank you, Nadine. Congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. I have to say, this one was wildly thought-provoking for me. All the gears in my head are turning, thinking of ways that they haven't really thought about things before, or actually really thought about things connected and related in a way before. And I'd have to say the biggest one that's standing out in my head is the way that Spencer connected the affordable housing problem to public schools, and how they're not two problems, right? But that they're one and the same. And that he kind of called out the erosion of the social fabric of our societies as contributing to that. And I think it couldn't be even more timely than what we're seeing right now, right? Decades ago, people would go to the same public schools, they go to the same gathering places, and people, they felt more cohesive, they felt more connected to each other. There wasn't as much fear, and we're starting to see that fear increase, right, in our communities as that social fabric erodes, right? People are opting out of public schools more, right? Which is even furthering that distance between people and their different thought processes. And I can't stop thinking about that and the way that he's connected it to affordable housing. I don't know if that you took any, takeaways from that, or what you think about that.
Yeah, I thought that his stat about how there is about 6 million homes that need to be built right now in the U.S. I thought that was That was a very interesting stat. And I was reading that a new working paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research, and they stated that they find that 2,000 office buildings in the U.S. can be converted to 400,000 eco-friendly apartment units.
Wow. 2,000 office, did you say 2,000 office buildings?
I said 200,000.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, 2,000 office buildings could be converted. Yes.
Into 400,000 eco-friendly units.
Yeah, correct.
That's really data that people need to be paying attention to. Seriously. And I think my biggest takeaway, at least from Spencer, on how we can start to overcome these problems is coalition building, right? How not just one developer teaming up with a class A multifamily, owner or whatever, but reach across the aisle, right? Class A developers, dealing and reaching across the aisle to affordable housing builders and things like that. That one's really got me thinking, because it's not just relevant to commercial real estate, right? It's just so relevant across everything that we're seeing kind of on the local and national level now as well.
Yeah, I think, as you said, with the local national level, you need to have governors, mayors, state legislators. They need to really start thinking about changing zoning laws, creating tax incentives for us to do these conversions, because we have these zombie buildings who have high vacancy rates, and they're in real trouble right now. And if we can't convert these buildings into apartments, there's going to be a real issue. And it's very concerning. And I think they really need to think about this quickly and steadily. And, as Dror Proleg has stated, he's one of my favorite authors. He wrote a book called, he's fantastic. He wrote a book called Rethinking Real Estate. And he also wrote an article on The Atlantic called The Urban Doom Loop.
I saw
Can
that.
Still happen. And he said that our cities will be better served embracing the transition to a world that's less centered around office buildings. So think about that. He's saying we need to start thinking more about creating more housing, creating more experiences outside of the office in order for cities to thrive. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it all comes, I totally agree, right? Because if you think about the way that we worked, right, years ago, people came to the office all day, every day, right? And that was the center of the community, so to speak, right? Was work. And now those buildings are empty. People aren't coming to those places of work anymore. And we're losing that centrality, right? And it all, I think, in my mind, and I always like to connect dots, and it comes back to Spencer's point of the erosion of that social fabric, right? If we're not coming together in those offices anymore, where are we coming together? And I think Dror's point hits it right on the head as well, is that, okay, if we're not coming together in the offices anymore, we need to think about a community. We need to think about an environment that's no longer office centric, and we need to figure out ways for people to come together again. And I completely agree. And the one thing that I think people need to be thinking about more and more, which Spencer talked about, and you and I talk about it all the time, is that the office buildings also, it's not that they're just sitting there empty and the landlords aren't getting, rent, is that the tax base for the municipality, for the city, is eroding, right? Because the values on those buildings are decreasing, and therefore the taxes collected on those buildings are going to be decreased as well. So it's just this it's all connected.
Yeah, I think there is definitely room for us to figure out strategies and how to improve affordable housing. And, you make great points on that.
Yeah. So you, being our tech expert here on CRE Unplugged, I have to ask you, because Mr. Levy made a point that I don't know what you think about it, but he actually stated that he thinks property level technology, right? So innovation technology apps, he broke it down into two buckets, right? He broke it down on the property level, and he broke it down on the predictive analytics level. And he thinks that the property level technology is hockey sticked, as he said, perhaps plateaued, and what we might be able to see is technology that can still make an impact on the property level. You being head of innovation at Empire in your job, you are constantly talking to these companies. You're getting approached all the time by companies that can, claim to help save money on capital expenses. What do you think? Do you agree with him on that claim that the property level technology is plateaued?
I don't necessarily agree with him. I think there's a lot of tech that's out there that can help reduce capital expenditures and help you receive ROI immediately. I think that's what he's missing on all that. For example, there's a company that we're looking at called AuditMeet, where they do a complete audit of all of your elevator maintenance contracts. So by doing that, they help you save a lot of money on your elevator bills. So again, you're getting that immediate ROI based upon this app that will really look into these contracts that might be hitting you up or overcharging you on a monthly basis.
Well, Ryan, as you and I know, ROI in our industry is everything, right? If the math needs to work out on paper, right? If this industry is not going to spend money unless it makes sense on paper. And so the ROI is everything. And so you're still seeing that. I know you're still seeing that. You're still seeing applications and companies that are out there finding new ways for companies to increase their ROI on their investment and decrease their capital expenditures, their maintenance expenditures, and all of that. I'm always amazed at how many applications you have stored in your head that can do certain things. So I'm glad that you're a tech expert here at CRE Unplugged. But
yeah, I just think with the current market, I think that's what owners are concerned about right now. I don't think they want to be looking at tech that's a nice to have. I think it's really what they need, and they're going to see immediate results. There needs to be a really good level of cost benefit analysis there that shows that they will be able to gain on reducing costs.
Absolutely. Another thing I have to say, though, so while Spencer may not have been bullish on property level technology, he was bullish on innovation in the education sector, which I am always a big proponent of shaking things and turning them upside down. And so you and I see this all the time, but the ability to be able to communicate persuasively, right, in our industry, and how he believes he's, drawing a line in the sand and stating that we're not educating people coming into our industry the right way. We're focused too much on the nuts and bolts, which is important, but to be presented in a way that's more so on an earnings call and not necessarily to make that effective sales pitch, right? So to be able to form and substance, right? And that's something that I work on. It's something that I used to be guilty of, of being in law school. It was just hammered in me, nuts and bolts, nuts and bolts, nuts and bolts, and being kind of the creative that I am as well. I think I just broke loose one day and was like, I just want to speak. I want to speak. I want to be me. I want to be colorful. I want to be persuasive. And so, but I lost track a little bit, or a sight of the importance of the nuts and bolts as well. And Spencer, called that out. He was like, you have to be good at both in this industry if you're going to be effective. And that one was a real big takeaway for me. And I'm going to be thinking about that one a lot and how I can keep doing better at that. So.
Yeah, I think we all can improve on public speaking, public communication, and working on that craft, because it's a craft that only gets better as you practice and start doing it more on a daily basis.
Yeah. And who knows, maybe somebody listening can work on it and enter local politics one day and help solve those big problems that we were talking about on our episode today.
Yeah, that would be the dream.
Never know, right? It all started here on CRE Unplugged. Anyway, that is all the time that we have today. A huge thanks again to Spencer Levy, Global Client Strategist and Senior Economic Advisor at CBRE. Please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your podcasts. And a reminder that Ryan and I will be at Blueprint in Las Vegas from September 17th through the 19th. You can join us and save $300 off your registration by using the link on our website and all of our social media pages.
If you have any questions that you want us to answer, please email us at info@CRE Unplugged. See you next time. And until then, keep your conversations real and unplugged.